Hello, welcome, and sorry. Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome to another Maple Bitcoin Friday live stream. We got a special one today. We got Mason. Mason's in the house. Mason, how do you pronounce that name? Ford? Mason Ford, the man himself. We'll get to Mason in a couple minutes here, but we're going to start off with an interesting topic here. Rajat, you got a tweet that you want to share, and we're going to just kick off. We're going to get right into it today. Rajat, take it away.
So I have a theory here. I've been learning more about digital credit. I listened to punter Jeff. What's his last name? Jeff
Walton.
Yeah, that guy. So I listened to his podcast, the What Bitcoin Did one, and it really got me thinking about digital credit and like how big this thing can be. So he was mentioning how you have to have 5,000 to 6,000 Bitcoin to issue digital credit. That's like the starting point. I don't know how accurate that is. I just heard him say it. I mean, it makes sense. Like if you have 2 Bitcoin, you probably can't run a digital credit system, right?
Yeah, I think it's about $1 billion of capital.
Right. That makes sense. 500 million to $1 billion. Right. So the way that I see it, the current financial system is built on what happened to Jor? The current financial system is built on it's built on a credit system that's paying like 5-6% interest. Money market funds are paying 4% maybe, and they're worth $7 trillion. And then with this new type of capital, Bitcoin is capital, Bitcoin is wealth, Bitcoin is an asset that you can do whatever you want with. If you want to use it for money, you can. If you want to use it as collateral, you can do whatever you want with it. And I think that Bitcoin is building this parallel financial system to the current bond market where anybody can buy Bitcoin and they can issue digital credit as much as they want to, as much as they can handle. And as Bitcoin goes up, I mean, this is going to push Bitcoin to go up. As Bitcoin goes up, there's more of an incentive to do this. And every single lender, the people who are issuing bonds at 5 to 8% interest, they're probably going to get wiped out. The investment grade bonds, the companies that are issuing investment grade bonds at like 3 to 5%, they're going to have to find a way to give more interest. And the only way to do that is to own Bitcoin, to issue digital credit. And then you can do whatever you want with that credit. Let's say you create a sustainable business plan, you can earn more than 10%, you're going to do really, really well. But I think the point that I'm trying to make here is that any company can run this and they can do it. And why wouldn't they with strategy? I think strategy is going to do really well. I think the stock is going to do amazingly. Even if it stays at a 1 times MNAV, it's going to go insane. It's going to do insanely well. But over time, every company has to do this. And the only thing that we have to do as Bitcoiners is hold. That's it. We don't have to do anything. We just have to watch all of this play out. Like we've predicted what's going to happen, and now it's happening. And there's going to be shakeouts along the way. There are going to be times where Bitcoin's price falls, goes up, falls, goes up. You're going to see treasury companies that are selling their Bitcoin. I know you're pretty deep into the treasury companies, Mason. So over time, all we're going to see is this war going on to accumulate as much Bitcoin as possible. And there's going to be like this is a psyop. The price that's happened, the price that we see right now, it's a psyop. Like you can see the price drop like a brick, and then it goes back up over time and it grinds up, and then it drops like a brick again. It's just a way to shake people out. All you have to do is own Bitcoin and watch this thing go absolutely nuts because of the products that are being built on top of it. What do you guys think of this?
Some might even say we are right about Bitcoin. Mason, actually, we were talking about this before the show started here, and I think that Mason would be a good guy to kind of lead off the conversation here. As Rajat mentioned there, Mason's pretty deep into the treasury stuff. New job, new role, new gig. But what are your thoughts on this, Mason, kind of in the short term and then medium term and then obviously the long term? I think this is a really interesting conversation to walk through with the 4 of us here.
Yeah, I think digital credit is the thing that's going to make Bitcoin go to a $10 trillion, then $100 trillion market cap. And I think it's really important to recognize right now how small Bitcoin is relative to first the bond market, which is $330 trillion, and then also the Mag 7, right? So if we really think that Bitcoin is the apex asset. It's the best asset in the world. It's the best money in the world. It's, you know, the thing the world will adopt completely. All of the capital in the world somehow has to flow into Bitcoin. And I think what digital credit and hence the treasury companies are doing are they're opening up the floodgates for that capital to come in. And that's via the bond market. So what they're offering is they're taking Bitcoin, which in fiat terms is volatile and has very high returns and fluctuates a lot. And you know, it's not necessarily good for a short-term hold, right? It's not, you know, if I had medical bills or my, you know, tuition to pay or rent, I wouldn't necessarily want to hold that capital, that money in Bitcoin. Right now, Bitcoin, you know, from my perspective, should be viewed as long-term savings, right? This is something that you're going to want to hold for the rest of your life. And then hopefully, eventually, we're in a world where you spend it. But what digital credit is offering is they're taking this highly volatile Bitcoin and they're stripping the volatility and also stripping the returns, right? So instead of getting anywhere from 30 to 50% compound annual growth rate on Bitcoin, which that's kind of what most people are expecting for the next 10 years or so. If you look at the power trend or whatever model you're looking at, which I personally don't know how to feel about those. What it's doing is it's taking that incredibly volatile Bitcoin and it's stripping it's taking yield out of it, right? So they're offering a 10% dividend or higher, and when you not only 10%, but it's highly over collateralized and it's incredibly transparent. So when you look at digital credit compared to fiat credit, which, you know, it is corporate credit, so looking at future cash flows, which in the world of AI, right? How many businesses are going to be disrupted? How many corporations are going to be flipped on their head? Or you're looking at you know, mortgage-backed securities, which are requires many people to pay their mortgage. Let's say we go into some economic collapse like 2008. How stable is that? Or you're looking at sovereign credit, which is just either from the US government or from Japan or from Germany or any other nation issuing credit. And what do? They print the money to keep it going. So what digital credit is really doing is it's providing a superior form of fiat yield. It's an order of magnitude better than any other legacy instrument. So I think it's a really good transition tool for Bitcoin to go into a world where it's much bigger, and hopefully it will start to be adopted as a medium of exchange.
Yeah, I think that I look at it a couple different ways. I think that you guys are right, and kind of again going back to what we were talking about before, we kind of have different opinions on terms of like what's going to play out here, short term, long term, in between, what it looks like. I made a couple notes actually just based on that, and I think that in the next couple decades there's going to be a pretty big shift happen. Just I like that you said transition there, Mason. That's kind of how I see this right now as well, because at some point these institutions are going to realize that, hey, we don't want somebody else's IOU to this Bitcoin. We want to hold this Bitcoin ourselves. It's just we're not there yet. Like these companies, these pension funds, they just simply can't do that yet. Like it's not possible for them to do that. So that's how I saw a strategy as well, as kind of like a super highway, bringing allowing this capital to flow into Bitcoin that otherwise would be blocked off, like a roadblock there. So I think that that's going to increase in terms of them just understanding that they want to hold the asset long term. I think strategy is a much different beast than any other treasury company out there, any other public company. I think that they're kind of in a league of their own. But I also think in the next couple of decades, there's going to be a lot more people who actually understand what this asset is. And Rajat, you said it's kind of, I forget the term you use there, but it's like a mirage or an illusion or something like that. And that's really what it is. We're being manipulated into thinking that one Bitcoin is only worth 91,000 pieces of paper. Like that's just a complete joke. And so I don't know if it's manipulation or illusion or whatever it is, but it's just a really large misunderstanding and lack of education of what Bitcoin is. So I think that over that time, a lot of people are going to figure out what this is. And that's obviously going to drive up the demand for it, for self-custody. But I also think that Bitcoin's biggest competitor, we talked about the bond market here, but Bitcoin's biggest competitor in my mind is gold. And I think over these next couple of decades too, we're going to have a lot of people who are holding gold right now. The gold generation, essentially, they're going to be gone. So it's like, this is where we are today, but in 2 decades from now, I think that this whole system, this whole scene, it just looks completely different than today. And I think that it is this digital credit and these treasury companies who are kind of facilitating that transition. But I don't think it's a long-term play.
No. Yeah, that's one thing I was going to say is if we look at bond holders today, they're the conservative capital. They're just looking to preserve their wealth, essentially. And a lot of them have real negative rates of return on their bonds because of fiat debasement compared to the interest rate that they're getting for their money invested. And I think we could see the same thing happen in the long term, even for digital credit, even though it's paying 10%. The asset that's backing it, that I think we all believe will eventually become the base layer money and just what everybody wants and holds, will outperform that. So it's a short-term play to hold any of these digital credit instruments because you're looking for fiat, and fiat is a short-term play in general. So there's sort of, the way I look at it is like the bondholders have been sort of the losers at the table for a little while here with the negative real rate of return. And I see that there's sort of a temporary position where they can move into digital credit instruments and not be such big losers for a little while. But then ultimately, if they don't get Bitcoin at some point, and they're still taking 10% when they could get 30 to 50%, and they're not willing to weather the volatility, that the capital will erode because it's still fiat. These are still fiat instruments at the end of the day. So I think anyway.
Let me hop in there. Saylor in 2021 did an interview with Safety, and Safe asked him, what do you expect inflation to be for the next 5 to 10 years? And he said for the next 5 years, he expects it to be 15%. So when you take that into perspective, what are they offering? They're offering fiat yield backed by Bitcoin that generates anywhere from around 10 to 13% annualized. And the reason that they're offering that is because they are taking the money that you give them. They're taking the capital when you buy the preferred equities, and they're buying Bitcoin with it, which is going up 30 to 50%. And then they're giving you 10% back. So, essentially what they've done is they've gone long Bitcoin, short fiat.
Yeah.
And it's an amazing trade. Anyone who's borrowed money to buy Bitcoin and has been able to hold on to that Bitcoin and execute this trade over a 4-year time horizon has done extremely well. And that's what they're trying to do. And that's why people are buying the common equity, right? They see this as a form of leverage beyond Bitcoin. It's important to keep in mind that when you're buying the common, you are taking risk, right? You're taking counterparty risk. I think anytime you do anything, you're taking risk, but in this case, you are buying a security, right? And if you are buying MSTR, you're buying a security, and you should keep that in mind. Especially when you have the option to buy Bitcoin and hold it in self-custody. Personally, I dabble in it because I do think there's kind of a period in time here where you could potentially benefit from this transition period, right? All of this money, which is in these frankly, are we allowed to swear? Do you guys swear or no?
Yep.
I'll try not to swear. I'll try not to. In these really awful fiat bond instruments, they're going to be looking for an alternative, and that's what digital capital is. But I think, and we were talking about this before the show even started, there is going to be a time where capital allocators, who are just individuals like you and me, decide, hey, instead of trying to generate fiat yield, which in real purchasing power terms is decreasing every single year, compounding, why not just buy Bitcoin and hold it? And I think at that point, when people and large institutions start to ask those questions, I think there will be a few things happening. There'll be incredible monetary debasement. There'll be incredible geopolitical disruption, AI disruption. And I think at that point, that's where, Bitcoin goes really from the 0 to 1 moment of being a asset where most people are measuring it through a fiat lens to being a completely different system that is outside the grips of the fiat regime in which we live in today.
That's the suddenly moment.
Yeah.
So how long do you guys think that's gonna take? The way that I see it, I think we are currently in hyper Bitcoinization where the world hasn't figured it out yet, but it's happening, and there are merchants who are accepting Bitcoin because of, companies like Square. I have no opinions on Jack Dorsey or anything like that, but what he's doing with Bitcoin is pretty big, and I think that's part of hyper Bitcoinization. And over time, if people have the option to accept Bitcoin, and then other people have the option to pay with it, that's what leads to more and more people using it. And the way that I see it, I think we are in hyper Bitcoinization. I think it's going to take time. It's going to take like 50 years, because if you go to other countries, there are countries that they don't even have cable, like wires above them, like with electricity, with internet, with all that stuff. That infrastructure is going to take a long time to build.
But they might be able to skip it, Rajat.
Yeah.
Oh yes, that's right. With like I saw that in Africa, they're doing that. There are places that they don't even have the basics though. Like they're not. You still have to build cell towers. I guess with
satellites you don't.
But
satellites
you can.
don't.
But you can skip telephone lines, right? Which is what a lot of Africa did with cells. Like they adopted cell phones as opposed to landlines, and just skipped the entire infrastructure build out of telephone lines. Which can happen as well. Like, the payment systems they have are pretty unsophisticated, unreliable, and so they could skip building out, Swift or adopting Swift or whatever, and just go straight onto a Bitcoin standard from what they're
So do you guys? So I think we're in hyper Bitcoinization right now, and I agree with you with everything you guys just said. I thank you for correcting me on that, but I feel like this is going to still take longer than we expected to. How long do you think it's going to take? I personally think this is a generational asset. It's going to take time for the older generations to either give up control or, die off. Either they do it voluntarily or they do it without wanting to do it, and they just the asset value, they have to pass the assets down to the next generation, and then the next generation thinks, why would I want to manage 50 acres of real estate? I'd rather have Bitcoin. And then over time, it's just going to move to people who use it productively. But I think that's going to take decades.
Yeah, even thinking about that, Rajat, in terms of like the Square adoption.
Yeah,
I kind of see that as the same thing we're talking about with the digital credit here, where Square is just kind of the transition to people using Bitcoin as a peer-to-peer cash. Because at some point the vendors are going to say, well, why? Because I think with the way Square has it, they're offering 0% fees until like 2028, something like that. But then the vendors are going to have to start paying a fee again to Square. So they're going to say, okay, well, it's similar to like these treasury or the capital allocators saying, well, why would I want somebody else to hold my Bitcoin? Why would I pay a fee for them, premium to do that? Why don't I just hold it myself? But if you think about like how long it takes the average person to learn how to store Bitcoin for themselves, for their own family, think about how much more of a process it's going to be for these large entities to build out a whole team or to hire somebody, and what that's going to cost. Like, it is a whole thing. It's not something where you just snap your fingers and all of a sudden everybody's using Bitcoin and holding Bitcoin themselves. Like, it's a process. And I think every big change we've had in history before has taken at least a generation to kind of really catch on. So I don't think Bitcoin will be any different to that. People talk about tokenized gold and things like that, but it's like, the people who would be using tokenized gold aren't going to be around very much longer. And why would you need gold when you have to trust a third party and a central entity to do that for you? It's like, all these different components to me are just part of this transition into this new system. It is going to take some time. I don't think it's going to take 50 years though. I would guess like maybe 2 decades max.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think 20 years. I think it's kind of dependent on a few things. I think financial crises or just large disruptions in the world spur Bitcoin adoption. And that's just a function of pain, unfortunately. I think a lot of people came into Bitcoin during COVID when they kind of saw the world turned on its head. And that was the case for me. I was 18 years old and I thought I had, I was into equities, I was into stocks, I was into trading from a very young age because of my mother. And I thought I, kind of had some understanding of how the financial system worked, at least from a basic understanding. But when I saw the world shut down and stocks at an all-time high, that was like a severe cognitive dissonance, which I just couldn't ignore, right? And I started to think about the denominator in which those assets are being valued in, right? The dollar, and those assets weren't going up, the dollar was going down. Mm-hmm. So I think I unfortunately think pain is going to be a big factor in adoption. I also think, there is an edge case where there's some geopolitical strategy where I think we're seeing a lot of companies or a lot of countries buy massive amounts of gold, right? Mm-hmm. And if you were smart and you kind of saw where the world was going, which one way or another, we're going to a neutral settlement reserve asset, right? It's either gold or Bitcoin. And if you're a country who says, hey, we're going into a world of AI, we're going into a world of digital intelligence trading with each other, and really a stronger link to fundamental energy, which that's what the AIs run on, is energy and compute. You might be thinking, hey, Bitcoin seems like a far better fit for this world than rocks. Right. So I do think there is a edge scenario where, whether it's the US or some other big country, kind of rug pulls gold holders and says, hey, we're buying Bitcoin, and this is the neutral reserve asset of the world. And if you don't have any, if you're stuck holding the rock, well, too bad. And I think that could be a really big driver for Bitcoin. I think it would be, in the eyes of the public, it would be seen as a far more valuable thing. Hence, more people would want it. Hence, more people would accept it. Hence, there would be more trading and medium exchange. So those are two things that I've been thinking about. But I do think it will probably be something in between that, and will be more gradual. I just came back from Abu Dhabi, and I was speaking with a Swiss guy who just came back from India, and he was there in a pretty remote part of India, and he was saying everybody has a smartphone, and this is 1 billion people, and he was just kind of thinking about, what if Bitcoin adoption spread in India? That's 1 billion people right there. And if they start buying, $1 or $2 or really go heavy, and this is a rising country, and these are very hungry, hardworking people who are digitally native, and if they really go full hog into Bitcoin, it could be explosive. So that's another. I was like, that's a really interesting idea, but it doesn't have to be India. It could be South America. It could be Brazil. I think specific regional adoption, maybe as a function of financial collapse, is a really interesting thing to think about in the next few years.
Yeah, and I'll cop out here a little bit. I don't have a prediction of when it'll happen, but I'll say that there are a lot of vested interest, powerful interest in keeping the fiat system alive and being able to control the issuance of fiat currency. And that is something you can't do with Bitcoin, right? You cannot control the issuance of Bitcoin. So, I mean, Mason, you mentioned India there. I've talked to some people that live in India, and there's fiat on-ramp control, an inability to actually buy Bitcoin on an exchange and move it off of an exchange. You can hold it in there. You can see some price appreciation. You can sell it within there, but you cannot take self-custody. So where they can control capital, they'll try to. And I think that is really the variable. And obviously game theory starts to play out, because if a country, even a relatively small country allows its citizens more ability to access Bitcoin, then they will benefit on a global, on the global stage from doing so. And then it's, well, now we have to adopt Bitcoin. We have to allow Bitcoin because we're being beaten by this other country that has surpassed us in growth, right? So there's that. But I do see that the vested interest in the fiat system, all they try to do is kick the can down the road. All they try to do is market their fiat currency and, say, well, we're tightening the Fed's balance sheet, we're reducing rates, we have no inflation, we have stable growth. All of this is just to paint the picture that fiat is worth something and to keep that system alive because they benefit from that. So it's really just, when does the can hit a wall and they can't kick it any further? And when is there enough adoption where the game theory starts to play out, where we can't stop this and we have to adopt it in some way? And there will, like, even now with like the ETF and stuff, it's they can sort of control who has custody of it because they're offering an ETF instead, and they're sort of rent seeking with the interest rate off of it. So there's little ways where the people that are, highly in the fiat system can control certain aspects of it. But as you kind of said as well, there's going to be a move towards neutral reserve assets, and Bitcoin is the best one. I'm still here. My camera just overheated.
Yeah, there's I don't know. There's just so many different factors involved here, and that's why I do think, kind of talking through the political landscape of this, I do think that that's why it could take longer than some expect for it to fully play out. But at the same time, once we get to that moment where they realize that, we can't do anything to stop this anymore, once that game theory kind of gets to a certain point, I think that's when it happens suddenly. And countries like India, like the US, China, I don't that's the interesting thing to me. Like India and China are so deeply entrenched in like the gold, and they have so much gold. It's like at one point, do they just say, okay, we were wrong about this trade, we're going to swap this gold for Bitcoin now? Because at that point, I think whatever fiat dollars they're able to generate and print, they're not going to buy much of either asset. So it's like they kind of have to choose Bitcoin or gold at some point. And I just don't see gold as like the winner in any of these circumstances, to me anyways. I mean, I could be wrong about that, but yeah, I mean, I was kind of hoping during the show, like we could kind of, this is my vision for today's show, just kind of like look into the future. And I think Mason, as being such a young guy, who has a very deep understanding of Bitcoin, I think we're just going to do this for a while. If you guys are good with that, just kind of like play through different thought experiments into the future. Mason, like what's going on with your age group? Are people into Bitcoin? What are you noticing for people in college?
No.
No.
No, not really, unfortunately. The main demographics for Bitcoin right now are the millennial cohort.
Yeah.
So this is age 30 to 45, I would say. Maybe slightly older as well. And then from there, it goes progressively up for, second, I think Gen X is second most popular, then boomers, then Gen Z. So really we are not into it. And I think that's just a function of a few things. I think it's number one, not having money, not having capital, right? When you don't have the money, then every day is kind of just a struggle, right? You have no economic energy to store, so hence why would you be thinking about storing economic energy? I think another function of it is, I think my generation deeply believes that the issues in our world are created by the political systems or the economic systems in which they live in. So that would be, it's red's fault, it's blue's fault, right? It's the conservative, it's liberals. No, socialism's the answer. No, we need to be more conservative. Or it's capitalism, right? We need authoritarianism, we need communism, right? So I think there's many just kind of ideological differences in how the world should be run, and I think a lot of those are deeply economic, but they're deeply economic, yet my generation is financially illiterate. So you have a lot of really horrible takes, at least that's what I see, but it's not their fault. We weren't taught about money at any point in our lives, and it was never something that we questioned. When I asked my friends, have you thought about potentially the money is the problem, it's like the root systemic issue, it hasn't even crossed their mind. So I think that's kind of where my generation is at. And I also think Bitcoin, unfortunately, because it seems so high in fiat, there's some unit bias there, it doesn't seem as attractive. And what my generation really wants in this kind of fast-paced fiat, low time preference society is something more akin to gambling. I want an instant 10x. I want 100x. I want it now, and I don't really want to work hard. I don't want to save. I don't want to hold it for the long term. And yeah, that's just that arises from fiat, and unfortunately people get caught in that. And I think, again, there will be more pain until people see it, or they don't, and then we're just in the new system, and they kind of just missed it.
They missed it, but I still feel like in that system that we're talking about here, when you take somebody's ability to create money out of thin air away, then everything changes. Everybody benefits from that. I think that's what a lot of people get wrong in Bitcoin, is they're like, well, I missed the boat. Bitcoiners are the ones who are going to benefit. And yeah, it's true. It's like, it's same as anything in life. If you can take some time out of your life and study something and you end up being right, you get rewarded for that. Bitcoin's no different, no exception to that. But I do think that in a world where we have a hard money standard like Bitcoin, even gold would be 100 times better than we are today. But like, every single person benefits from that. So the kids who are your age and even younger than that, they might turn out just fine, because again, nobody can steal their value anymore. Whatever value that they do create and are able to store, nobody can debase that from them. And that's just a huge difference from what we have now, like night and day.
Yeah, absolutely. If you listen to Jeff Booth and his thesis, which is economics or the free market should be deflationary, what that really means in a Bitcoinized world, every year you'll be making less Bitcoin, yet your Bitcoin will be able to purchase more. And that's a radically different system. In fact, it's the complete opposite of the system that we have now. Every year you might make a little bit more, yet you afford less. And when you start to think about the implications of that, yeah, even the people who don't have Bitcoin at the beginning of the, let's say we transition and they don't have Bitcoin at the start, they will be better off than the system that we have now, which forces them to progressively work harder for less.
Yeah, I've done some calculations on this. Like, even if you buy $1 a month, you're gonna eventually be able to buy a house. That $1 a month, it's gonna take time. It's gonna probably take you like 60, 70 years, but in 60, 70 years, $1 a month is gonna buy you a house. Like, that's wild. And people don't see that. People don't care, right? Because they just think, oh, it's not going to do anything, because they see $1 and $1 doesn't buy them anything. So they think, oh, if $1 doesn't buy anything in the real world, then why would I buy something fake with $1? It's thin
Right.
air, and just giving it away. They don't see that, right? Even though they could make a difference. Like, there are people out there. It's like what you said there, Mason. Most people. So I started talking about Bitcoin because I started talking about Bitcoin because I had initially I was posting content about personal finance, about saving, and making these decisions that increase your net worth. And you can, if you have terrible spending habits, there's nothing that you can do. You can't earn any amount of money to outpace that spending habit. It's like, if you have a terrible diet, doesn't matter how much you work out, you're not going to get fit. You're going to keep getting fatter and fatter. You're going to keep adding body fat to your body. Same thing with money. If you keep spending and you try to save, that money that you have saved is going to go away, and eventually you're going to be in debt. So that's the thing that people don't understand. They don't have that mindset of thinking that I can save money, I can build wealth, I can make a difference in my life without having to rely on somebody else. And they can't absorb the concept that you can buy, like I said, $1 of Bitcoin a month will eventually buy you a house. But if you save $1 a month, then that's not going to do anything for you. And I think that's the paradigm that people are stuck in.
Yeah, I think looking at, saving Satoshis instead of Bitcoin is really helpful. That's what I've found with my friends when they can say, I have 1 million Satoshis, or I have 500,000 Satoshis. It's a better feeling, because when you tell them there could be a world in which Satoshis equal dollars, or potentially more valuable than dollars, that's really powerful. And that brings immense amount of hope. But in order to fully grasp that that's a reality, or a potential reality, I think you have to do a lot of work. And that's really the challenge. Is a lot of people, number one, either are immediately turned off by Bitcoin because of they've been propagandized for maybe the past 10, 15 years since Bitcoin's existence, or they quite literally don't have the time, right? Maybe they're just on the treadmill and are have kids, trying to feed their kids, or just trying to get ahead. And it's ironic, because in learning about Bitcoin would potentially be the most profitable thing they could ever do, but they can't see that because they fundamentally don't understand the problem is the money, right? And that's kind of the meme that I think we need to put out into the world, which is the money is the issue.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, it's broken money, and we need to get on the Satoshi standard. I think the unit bias that you mentioned is actually is way bigger problem than most people realize that are already
100%.
in Bitcoin. Though you go on TikTok, people are talking about XRP and whatever meme coin du jour, and it's because they're looking for moonshots. They're like, oh, you can't get rich off Bitcoin anymore. We need, you can own 10 of these for $10, and then they think, oh, well, if it goes to $10 each, then that's a 10x, and it's just nonsense, because they don't understand the nominal bias. So that's a massive problem. Another thing that you mentioned that I thought was kind of interesting was you mentioned that your generation is very conscious of wanting to make a change, in the world. They're sort of ideological. And it's so crazy to me, like, because Bitcoin, that was a huge draw for me to get into Bitcoin, was like the idea of looking into some history and thinking, okay, well, what happened and why was World War I and World War II so massive? Why did it go on so long? Why were there so many knock-on effects of it? Oh, it turns out they just debased their money to be able to afford to continue to go to war. And whoever debased the money the worst lost the war. And then, looking back into history, like the Bitcoin Standard goes over this of, when wars were fought and armies had to be paid in gold, the gold would begin to run out, and they say, okay, you know what? This battle's gone on long enough. Let's, make some concessions. Let's, split up the land. Let's end it, because this is getting unaffordable, and we have no money to print. So like I live on the west coast of Canada. You see like, Ukrainian flags everywhere. You see Palestinian flags everywhere. This is just the environment that I live in. And a lot of my friends are into all that stuff. And I'm like, you can, be as mad as you want. You're not really going to have an effect on the military industrial complex that is profiting from all of this. And there's sort of that base understanding of like money is power. So why not try to change the money, right? Why not try to fix the money and take the power away from the people that are doing things you don't want to do? It just seems like such like a simple thing to understand, but I don't know. It's very strange that people aren't figuring that out, I find.
It's nonstop propaganda. Like Mason said, that's what it is. Like literally people, when they watch TV, when they open their phone, everything is this versus this. That's all it is. That's why people have flags up, because they were like Ukraine over Russia, Palestine over Israel, whatever it is. Like it's all us or somebody versus somebody else. But it should be every single human being on the planet versus the people who print money. That's the war. That's what it is. That's the only thing that matters. Like somebody on Twitter yesterday, I don't spend a whole lot of time on Twitter anymore, but somebody said, if only we had Stephen Harper as a prime minister, we would have, it's like, no, it has nothing to do with one single person. First of all, Harper was probably at the same meetings as Trudeau was, but it has nothing to do with the politician. It has everything to do with the fiat money. And every country on the planet right now is operating on a fiat standard. And that's the problem that 8 billion people face. So that's why Bitcoin's such a big deal, is because, it's great for moving money back and forth. It's great for store, but the main thing that it solves is the store of value. People want to be valuable. They want to contribute to their society. And whatever they contribute, they get back in the form of some sort of money. And if you have something like Bitcoin, you can actually store that Bitcoin into the future as long as you need to. And right now, it's just the complete opposite of that. It's just losing value by the second because they're printing more and more of those units. So I think it's propaganda. And the shitty thing is like the people who print the money own the propaganda. And so it's just a nonstop cycle of just nonsense. It's just all a complete scam.
And oh, sorry. I want to say, if we go back to what we were saying before, so the beginning topic, the digital credit, I think the digital credit basically breaks that, because right now the system is built on real estate. Real estate is like the entire financial system is a house of cards, and on the base layer, the house of cards is built on real estate and bonds, and people borrow money to buy real estate, and that's how more money is created and added to the economy. I think Bitcoin, the Bitcoin-backed credit or digital credit, breaks that, because right now, if you listen to, I think it was Christine Lagarde, she was talking about how you need real assets. Bitcoin is backed by nothing. You need real assets. But then the real assets, the only real assets that they think are real are the ones that they own. Right? So that's real estate, that's stocks, that's margin accounts, that's mortgages. So what Bitcoin does is it kind of breaks that. So they're going to keep saying, oh, you should buy real assets. But now the people who own the fake assets in their mind are able to make way more money. Why is that? And I think that just completely crushes everything about the fiat system. And that's what Bitcoin is doing. Bitcoin is making everybody question the reality that they're living in. And Mason, you said before, cognitive dissonance. People have these beliefs. They know that their life is getting more expensive. But what's the incentive to get out of that? And now I think Bitcoin is that incentive. I think that digital credit is that incentive.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think I think when people talk about you need to get into real assets, it makes me laugh, because one of the things that's great about Bitcoin is the fact that it is in the ether, right? It's non-physical. It takes away a whole bunch of risks which are there with traditional assets. Operational risk, governmental risk. There's so many risks with stuff being physical, right? And that's what they're talking about with real. Like it's just simply that they can't conceptualize of Bitcoin because it's too out there for them, right? It's
abstract.
It's abstract. Yeah, sorry, I was looking for that word. And but yeah, Bitcoin's backed by energy, right? That's fundamentally what it is. It's not, people say it's not backed by anything. It's backed by energy, and energy is increasingly important. And I think what was really interesting to me were the recent comments by Elon Musk.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you guys saw this, but he mentioned Bitcoin. He said we're going into a world where energy is money. And then kind of separately, he said, and Bitcoin's backed by energy. He didn't really, like, outright kind of say we're going into a world in which Bitcoin is the fundamental base layer of value, but he almost did. Right? And I think if you kind of read between the lines, I think energy is increasingly important, and hence Bitcoin is increasingly important. I think we're going away from this world of complete abstraction. Fiat is abstraction, and we're going to something which is intensely real yet incredibly abstract, and that's hard for people to really get their head around.
Yeah, I mean, Bitcoin is incredibly complicated and so much to understand, but Fiat is way more complicated. The fiat system we have is so much more abstract, so much more complicated, so many more moving parts. Like, I feel like I have a grasp of an understanding of Bitcoin, and I learn new stuff about the fiat system all the time. Oh, this, there's so many rabbit holes of the euro dollar system. Like, what's going on over there? Like, so much just crazy shit that we just all accept because we go to a store and the storekeeper is willing to accept the money that we grew up with. And so we don't think about how complicated it all is. But yeah.
I think people just have a really difficult time in, they've just been told what money is their whole lives. And now they kind of have to make their own decisions, and they don't know how to make that decision. And that's what makes it so difficult. Because right now they're told, oh, yeah, coins, bills are what money is. And that's how you pay for things. That's how you get what you want. But most people, I mean, nothing against them either. Most people want to trust the system. They want to trust that the people who are running the system are working for them and not against them. And that's just how we advance as society, right? You have to trust that. There's always trust. Like, even StreamYard, for example, like the app that we're using to stream this, we have to trust that they're not censoring what we're saying, right? And of course, people will tell you, okay, yeah, this is what's happening. But you have to trust the system to actually be able to progress as a society. How do we trust that? Oh, if we're driving down the road, there's not going to be a sinkhole. We trust that the engineers maybe figured that out and they tried to make sure that that's not going to happen. So we have to trust somebody, and I think that's what's actually hurting people, because once you trust a system too much, it starts to work against you. It starts to try to hurt you. And that's exactly what fiat is doing. Fiat worked. Money worked for so long. We've had money for thousands of years. But at one point, we realized that all I have to do is manipulate these people by getting them to use my money, and I can create as much of it as I want to, and they'll do whatever they can for it. So why shouldn't I do that? And that's been happening for how long? The denarius went from like 97% silver to like 2% or 0.2% at one point. There's lots of examples. Rye stones, people started bringing in random stones that had the same circle in the middle from other islands, and it's just wild that we've always tried to do this, but Bitcoin fights that. It stops that from happening because nobody can control Bitcoin. First of all, you can build currencies on top of Bitcoin, but the people who you want to use those, you get to choose to use them. Before this, there was no choice. Now we have that choice.
Yeah, and when you trust a system like this your whole life, and then you start questioning it, I mean, that's why people say that Bitcoin's an ego test first, is because you start to have to say, uh, you start to have to ask, should I have trusted this, and why did I trust this for 20 years? And now I'm wrong about something, and you have to admit that you're wrong and that you don't know something. And this is a very humbling experience. Bitcoin is incredibly humbling, and yeah, people are not most people are not ready to do that. It's, people avoid those kind of painful experiences of having to reevaluate their belief in something, at all costs. I mean, uh, think of all the industry that we have that is all about avoidance, right? Video games, movies, everything. Yeah, we love avoidance as humans.
Distractions everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think between distractions and people just simply not having anything to store right now, that's why most people aren't too interested in Bitcoin. It's like, of course, the college kids don't have a whole lot of value to store. That's why they're not into it. But, if you look at the average household in the West, most people have more debt than they have assets. So what are they supposed to store? And it's sad, but I think the one thing that Bitcoin changes a lot is people's spending habits. Because in the fiat system, nobody has any sort of incentive to save, because those dollars that they're holding today in their bank account, they know, even if they don't really understand how the monetary system works, they know those are going to buy less in a week from now, which is crazy to say, absolutely crazy to say, but it's the reality. And for the first 30 years of my life, I lived in that world where if I had $50 in the bank account, I'm buying something with it. I'm going out for some beers, or I'm going out for lunch, or whatever it is. It's just like, there's no incentive to save there, because what's the point? Is people have this idea in their head that they're never going to get ahead. And for the most part, they're right. In fiat, you will never get ahead. And I think for the Gen Z people out there who might be watching this, is like, you literally have no chance in hell to buy a house. If you continue living in the fiat system, you're never going to get a house. It's going to be out of reach. It's every single day, those houses are going up in fiat terms. So the only chance that they have is to just slightly change their spending habits. Maybe they take one night off of the bar this weekend and put that into Bitcoin instead. I think anybody who's willing to make such a very small sacrifice in terms of their spending habits is going to be, their world's going to be changed by it because of Bitcoin. Not many people are going to do that, but I think that there are some people, both college students and people, millennials our age. And I think, baby boomers have a lot of capital that they could allocate to Bitcoin, but everybody else, I think that just a small change in their spending habits will have a massive impact on their future in Bitcoin. I had something else I was going to ask Mason here. What was it now? I just started talking there. Mason, you said power law you don't really subscribe to. I just wanted to get your quick thought on the power law. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I have a hard time with these models because I view the world as simply humans making decisions, right? And it's hard for me, if the US government comes out tomorrow and says we're buying 5 million Bitcoin and they print the money, right? What's the probability of this happening? Very, very close to zero, maybe. But the world, because of the power structure of the world, there are people who are very important and who have a lot of power and can make decisions which affect the rest of us, right? And so when you have a model that's kind of looking at the past and projecting into the future, I don't think it really accounts for, number one, the instability of the world that we're going into, which it's just, again, a function of fiat. Like, these two things cannot exist. This is the Jeff Booth, the deflation from technology and the fiat system. These cannot coexist, and it's a constant battle. I just think, individuals with a lot of power, but also the masses at any point can step out of this cage and free themselves, right? And that's just an individual decision. Maybe, at a deeper level, maybe I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic that people will decide to adopt Bitcoin because I don't think it's too out of reach for most people. I think people could get this, but I think the power law and the rest of these models are just kind of a function of the reality of in which we've lived in so far, which is, yeah, it takes time for people to adopt this stuff. And the money printing comes in waves. I think progressively more, but to me, that's what the models represent. So I do think they do hold some water, but I'm not going to trade them. I really think if you're looking at models to predict price, I don't think you understand Bitcoin, right? Because that kind of indicates to me that you're trying to get some edge to do what? Like you're getting edge to do what? Are you trying to sell Bitcoin for fiat and then buy lower? And I think if you're trading it, you don't understand what you own.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
so you're
kind
saying
of
that Bitcoin is Godzilla, and that's all models. What was Sailor's quote about Godzilla?
yeah, all models will be destroyed. When
Yeah.
Godzilla comes, all your models will be destroyed.
That's my theory too, man. Like I feel that way because we've never had an asset like Bitcoin before. That's why,
Mhm.
right? We've had gold for thousands of years now. Gold, we know the positives about it. We know the negatives about it, or some people do, but everybody knows about gold, and it's been around. Models can be based on things that have been around, but there's nothing in human history like Bitcoin that's existed before. So it's like, how do you compare that to anything else with models?
Well, I think the other thing too is if we project Bitcoin into the future, there's a reality or a possible reality, one that I think we probably all believe in, that they cannot both exist, Bitcoin and fiat, right? So this model predicts a price of Bitcoin in fiat. What happens when there's no fiat? The model doesn't work. It's based off nothing. And
Yeah,
right.
true. Very true.
And I want to be clear here. Like, I do think there's a good probability, there's a high probability that Bitcoin will follow the power law as it has been. But, again, it's kind of a philosophical thing for me. It's like, I think we're going into a world in which fiat doesn't exist, or fiat, Bitcoin just blows fiat out of the water. And then all your models are destroyed. I don't know when that will happen, but I just don't see the power law going on forever.
Yeah. So what is the point of even using it now then, right? Like, it really would be used for trading type indicator.
Right.
And that is really short-term thinking if you believe that fiat will not exist at one point. So, yeah.
I think I agree with what you guys are saying in general, but I think there are some merits to having something like a power law because it's the way that I've seen Geo, the guy who set it up, I guess, who first started talking about it. The way that I saw him talking about it is he bases it on human nature. So let's say if Bitcoin's price goes to a certain level and let's say somebody has a few $1 billion worth of Bitcoin, they can borrow against it. They can do this and they can do that. They can create preferred shares. They can create a company. They can start paying themselves to that company or whatever. They can do all that stuff. But I do think that human nature tells us to take some chips off the table and to protect what we have at a certain level of wealth. But then that's how redistribution happens. That's how Bitcoin is going to move from the hands of people who have thousands, hundreds of Bitcoin, whatever the number is, just a massive number of Bitcoin. That's how Bitcoin moves from those people to the people who actually want to buy. So we were talking earlier about a lot of people feeling like maybe they missed out or they can't afford it or it's just out of reach. If the price goes down, some of them will actually end up buying. But then again, this is it's Godzilla, right? The price you buy Bitcoin at the price you deserve, meaning that if you didn't buy at 50K when it was at 50K and you want it to go back down to 50K, chances are it's not going to go back down there. just because you want it to, and because you feel like, oh, this is what's going to happen. There's a lot of people in the comments saying, oh, it's going down to 35K, and they're telling their reasons as well. They're saying it's because I'm working on a whole coin, and if it doesn't go to 35K, then I can't get to it. Then I can't get to a whole coin, right? But that it feeds on itself. So I mean, I think the models are okay. I mean, as long as they work, they're okay. But we've never had digital credit before. We've never had Bitcoin lending before. Now there's more of a reason for people not to sell their Bitcoin. And if the whales do want to sell, there are going to be more than enough people who are just buying regularly. Like all four of us, we're probably buying every month, every week, whatever the consistency is. There's people who are buying every year. That's perfectly fine. Whenever they're buying and they're putting it away. So, I mean, I think there is some value to the models while it happens. And like I said, I don't think that Bitcoin is going to be adopted right away. I think it's going to take 50, 60 years but in that time though, keep in mind, I'm not saying that the price won't go up. I'm saying that the price is one Bitcoin is going to $1 trillion because US dollars are literally worthless. So the way that I see it, I mean, it's going to go up forever, but it'll take time to get to that point. And I think the power law, it measures where things are going to be, trying to go based on, let's say, historical data. But then again, in the past, we had retail investors basically commanding the market. They had full power over the market. And now it's institutional investors. So I think the trend is going to change. And I do think we're going to go to massive, this thing is going to go crazy. I think it's going to take over the world. I titled the video, Bitcoin's going to a $500 trillion market cap or whatever. And I think that's going to happen. But I do see some value in the models. I do see some value because let's say even Michael Saylor steps in and he wants to buy everything. If the price goes high enough, more people are going to come into the market and sell. Because there are people who bought, let's say, at 100K and they just want a 50% return. They want a 60% return. They want a 40% return, right? And they'll sell. They're perfectly okay with it. And they don't understand it. But then I think that's what kind of, I think what's supported by that is that most people don't understand Bitcoin. And I think we all agree with that. I think less than 0.1% of the world actually understands Bitcoin.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting to know. I don't know how we would ever get that data.
Yeah,
but I think it's much less than 0.01%. I want to give a couple shout outs here. We had a couple zaps come through the airwaves to our Coinos, which is the QR code right beside Rajat's head there. Alex, I believe, or Conrad, I don't know. There's two people who send the same zap here. 963, a reverse Tesla zap, and we got a 1212. Mic check 1212 from Andy N. And we got a couple over on Zapstream too. Kevin's Bacon, David T, Sin Diesel, Gilbert, and the legend himself, the Grinder. So we got a couple different things here. We got our happy hour starting in about 24 minutes from now. So we might have Mason join us on the show if he's up for it. Might be a little surprise for the members of the Maple Bitcoin School community there for our weekly show. I don't know if you guys saw, but I began my happy hour a little bit early here today. So there's a QR code there. If you want to a little bit more intimate, a little bit more personal, you got any specific questions on your mind, hop in there. Scan the QR code. You get obviously the live streams, happy hours every week after the YouTube. But we also got a shitload of exclusive content in there for anybody who's looking for different strategies, looking to exchange a little bit better, looking to protect their private keys, which is the most important part of Bitcoin, in my opinion. Lots of stuff in there. So that's the QR code there. And we got a couple super chats here too. Carlin sent $5. Thank you, Carlin. And we got a question here from Nav, which we'll get to in 1 second. But yes, there's the QR code there. So we'll probably do a couple, 15, 20 more minutes here. If you have any questions for Mason, just throw them in the chat there. I'm doing my best to kind of moderate here. Looks like we got some Mason fans in the house today. So if you do have any specific questions for Mason, you can either throw it in the chat there or you can join us for the happy hour. What was that? Oh, we had one super chat there from Nav.
Yeah, from Nav.
Thoughts on mining Bitcoin on a large scale, not in your basement, but on a whole property? I've been thinking about this quite a bit, you guys, and I'm kind of interested to hear your guys' thoughts on this because Saylor was talking about the opportunities coming. I think in his speech in Dubai, where Mason was, he mentioned a couple different things. I don't know why I'm so freaking blurry here. but he mentioned like a big opportunity, a bigger opportunity, and the biggest opportunity in the future of finance. And kind of his idea was to basically start a bank backed by Bitcoin, which a lot of people have been thinking that's maybe what strategy will turn into at one point. But if you tie Bitcoin mining into that, and if you have certain incentives from certain governments to set up mining infrastructure, which could be coming, I believe it's already happening in El Salvador. I don't think it'll be much longer, assuming the administration continues in the US. But just imagine that you have a bank that's backed by Bitcoin, not a fractional reserve, but fully backed, fully reserved with Bitcoin. And that bank actually has Bitcoin mining operation in the background that's basically funding its own capital there. I think that's super interesting to see play out. But I think Nav's talking about kind of personal, like individual level here. What do you guys think about this?
Well, in some way, what you're describing is actually what Tether is. Like they have a
True,
whole
yeah, 'cause they
mining
got a lot of
operation.
mining too, eh?
Yeah. Anyway, Mason, you hop in there.
Yeah, I think Bitcoin mining is a very hard business, and you need to make sure that you have a very low cost of energy.
Right.
So and there's a lot of math that goes into it. I'm no Bitcoin mining expert because honestly, it's a whole separate domain, right? It's a whole field, it's a whole career, and what you're up against are massive public companies, right, who have a lower cost of capital than you because they are public and because they can raise very easy. And yeah, I mean, I think before you put any capital into Bitcoin mining, make sure you have the numbers right, make sure you have some projections, and see if you could outcompete the opportunity cost of just buying Bitcoin and holding it, because that's a very hard thing to do.
Yeah.
And for the majority of people, for the majority of institutions, the best thing to do is just buy Bitcoin with the capital that you have, go do something productive in the world, store your energy in it, and hold it for a long period of time. That's kind of where I stand on mining.
A huge variable of Bitcoin mining at large scale is being able to get good energy contracts. It's all like a huge part of the cost is energy, right? Electricity. And if you're not like, it's sort of because scale affects your profitability to such a degree that it centralizes to it centralizes to a few that can, yeah, exactly as Mason said, raise capital efficiently, really demand certain energy contracts or bid for them in the auction type style and get those. The infrastructure, the buying the miners, all of that is affected by scale. And I think it's the other thing too you mentioned is sort of the projections into the future, right? But the Bitcoin mining, the way it works on the network with the difficulty adjustment and basically how hash rate is always going up and to the right over a period of time, it's very hard to project. It's like the perfect free market where it constantly gets more difficult to mine. So if you just looked at it today, you might be profitable, but then you don't know who else is thinking about adding hash rate onto the network, or if all of a sudden, cheap electricity from a dam or from a hydro or from a solar project or something is going to come online to the Bitcoin network. And then that's going to lower your chance of hitting a block and becoming profitable. It's a very difficult thing to project accurately, I would say. Like, it's possible to project in some sort of estimation, but it's an incredibly competitive business. And I think, honestly, the way it ends up making sense is it ends up becoming more centralized in some way. Governments with cheap access to electricity end up coming on board. Energy companies, communication companies, all of these companies that have access to electricity end up coming on board to some degree. And then home miners, where you're using the heat, where you're stacking non-KYC Bitcoin. This is where it ends up starting to make sense. And that's a much smaller scale than what Nav was asking about.
But I think it's more about the incentive, though, right? In his question, he didn't really ask, I'm doing it for a profit or anything like that. Some people just want to decentralize the network. and they're okay with taking the loss. I think if you're doing it as an individual, you're probably going to take a loss. But then there's also other benefits to mining Bitcoin. I what you guys said was I completely agree with. Like Mason, you said it's very hard to make a profit, and I completely agree. That's because it's so competitive, and that's 100% true. But there could also be other benefits where, let's say, for example, if you want non-KYC Bitcoin, and that's the best way to get it.
Yeah.
Right. Or you want to make sure that it's game theory, right? If we just rely on all these institutions to control mining, then they're going to have more control over what transactions get through. Yeah. And some people they have enough Bitcoin. And I was thinking about this morning. At a point, once you've built your wealth with Bitcoin, you kind of want to give back to the Bitcoin network. And I'm at a point, let's say, for example, if I have, let's say somebody who has $1 million, they're like, oh, okay, I earned this $1 million from Bitcoin. Now I feel like I want to make sure I protect this $1 million. And how I'm going to do that is I'm going to keep the network as decentralized as possible. I'm going to contribute my energy, my time, my effort to the network to make sure that continues to happen. And at that point, they know that they're not making money mining Bitcoin, but they want to do it because they want to support the network. They want to make sure that it stays decentralized. And I think now there are even better ways to do it. Like you can use the heat that comes out of your miner to heat your home, right? There's space heaters that can be used to mine Bitcoin. So depending on like what his question there is, Nav, maybe if you want to, you can add more detail on there and then we can answer specifically based on, but I personally think that as an individual, if you're mining, I don't think it's worth it.
No.
I'd rather
you're probably not going to beat the hurdle rate of Bitcoin because it takes time. Like the initial investment could go straight into Bitcoin or into something that's going to make you Bitcoin over time, but maybe cost more in electricity than the Bitcoin you get. Even if you are profitable mining, it's still going to take time to acquire that Bitcoin, and the amount of sats might never equal the amount that you could have bought from the get-go, depending on the price of Bitcoin, the hash rate, everything.
It's kind of interesting to me. I got a thing here to share. I don't know if we'll be able to see this very well or not. Can you guys read that? Okay.
Yeah,
a little bit. Yeah,
I can pull up my spreadsheet if you want. It's the same thing, but it gives it'll be clear.
I can zoom. Oh yeah, I can. So I just thought it was kind of interesting talking through this mining stuff because I do think that this is going to be something that governments get very involved in. I think that they kind of already are. And I think that if we think about the fiat system as it is today, the governments have been able to decide the winners and losers of a lot of things with the subsidies that they offer to companies, which is not a free market at all, right? If your income relies on a government grant, that means that your business probably isn't profitable. It shouldn't exist. There's no demand for it in a free market. And I think that the further we go into Bitcoin mining will be a way where governments can actually still decide the winners and losers to an extent, because the biggest asset that a lot of these governments have, especially here in the West, is land, right? Like resources, access to resources. It's no coincidence that the governments have all these provincial and state parks and federal parks, is because it's very precious and scarce land with natural resources. So when they can figure out a way to convert that using Bitcoin, convert those natural resources, both around us and stranded version of that, into money, I think that they're going to be able to decide the winners and losers of this. But I think by the time they do that, by the time they figure this out, there's only going to be about 1% of the Bitcoin that's left here. Because if you look at 2032 here, that's when we're at 2036, we're at 99.21% Bitcoin mined. Which means that even if they decide that, hey, we're gonna try to decide the winners and losers here, it's gonna be too late for them. Or by that time, Bitcoin is worth magnitudes higher than it is today, and it's actually worth them doing that. But that's kind of one way I see the government's getting involved with this, is actually utilizing the land that they have the claim to and starting to mine Bitcoin with it, or giving certain incentives to certain companies who play by their rules, things like that. But I think it's going to be too late by then, because there's not a whole lot of runway left with the Bitcoin schedule.
Well, keep in mind that's also just only newly issued Bitcoin, and we don't understand the future of the fee market, which all those fees go to the miners as well.
True. Very true.
So if there's
Yeah, that's
more
subsidies, that's
on-chain
right.
demand, if there's more on-chain demand, then miners could be more profitable.
Right.
And they could acquire more Bitcoin, and it's just sort of this little fraction off anybody actually using Bitcoin on-chain.
Good point.
We're already at what, 95% today?
We're in 88 days from now, we're going to be at 20 million coins mined. Just found that out today.
Wow.
That's crazy.
Wow.
A million left.
And it's so slow. It just happens. The newly minted coins happen so slow from now on. Like what, until 2140 or whatever it is? Yeah.
Well, just look at that. Like, we're going to hit block 1 million, block height of 1 million in 2028. By that time, 97% of the Bitcoin has been mined, which is 20.6 million Bitcoin. So that's for the first basically 20 years of Bitcoin, 97% mined. And then for the next 112 years, there's 3% left to be mined.
Wow.
And I didn't know this, but this is when the subsidies run out to block 6.93 million. I knew it was 2140, but I didn't know which block height it was. But it's 6.93. So another Tesla number in there, 693. That's
cool. Yeah, and this makes me think, looking at that block reward too. Like I've tried to make popular, I think American Hodl tried, made the popular meme of getting to 6.25 Bitcoin at one point, right? My idea is to encourage people to always try to get to a block reward of Bitcoin. Right now, I love that. That's pretty that might be unattainable, right? That's quite a lot of Bitcoin, 3.125. But every halving, it gets easier to get to that block reward. If your goal is just the current block reward, you will eventually end up with a huge amount of Bitcoin, because all those miners, all that hash rate, are going to compete for a tiny amount of new issued Bitcoin every single halving that goes by.
Yeah, a really cool way to conceptualize that is, let's say you have 3.125 Bitcoin right now. What that actually means is that you have 10 minutes of the network's energy, right? So you have 24 nuclear reactors going full, for 10 minutes, right? So that's a really awesome way to think about it. I think it's 24 megawatts. Is it megawatts or is it?
I don't know.
I think it's megawatts.
That's going into the hash rate right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's an interesting way to conceptualize it, because again, Bitcoin is so sort of theoretical and conceptual, and people, it's not backed by anything. It's not tangible. It's like, if you understand the amount of energy that's going into 10 minutes of the Bitcoin network, and you can hold that much amount of Bitcoin, like that is in some way, some potential could be worth that amount of electricity into the future, to turn that Bitcoin back into electricity by purchasing electricity with it. You could think about it in that kind of way as well.
And over time, because so what you were saying there, Mason, I actually like that a lot. And over time, in that 10 minutes, more and more energy is being directed to it. So that's how your purchasing power goes up. Wow, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, if you really think about it, like everything in the world is energy. Everything is.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of the biggest lies that we've been taught, is like money equals dollars. It's like, no, everything's energy. You do something, you're exerting energy. Somebody pays you for that in energy. Those are just units of energy that you're transacting with. And we've lived in a world where certain individuals have the ability to create those units without actually expending any energy. And that's why we have such a problem with the debasement and society overall. But if we just think about everything as energy, then you do something for somebody else, they pay you in energy. But the cool thing about Bitcoin is that nobody can debase it, which means that that energy that you exerted, you can now store in the perfect battery, which is Bitcoin, because nobody has the ability to print it. And because it takes real world energy to create those units, that's the parallel there. That's the connect, I guess, between the physical world and the digital world. And that's the beauty of Bitcoin mining.
Yeah, we are energy, right? And Jack Mahler's, he has a saying, Bitcoin is, or money is an abstraction of our time and energy, right? And if you're holding fiat and it's being debased, you're being debased.
Yeah.
Your life force is being sucked away from you. And that's where this really becomes a spiritual, philosophical imperative that we go into a new system in which the majority of people aren't at the whims of a very few.
Yeah.
I was gonna say it's pretty crazy. Most people think, oh, Bitcoin is like, there's not that much to know. There's nothing to really understand or to learn. But like, we've talked about so many topics here today that we've never talked about before.
Yeah.
That's crazy. And we can just keep going. Like, I'm sure there are thoughts, Mason, that you have, Jor, for us, that you guys have, that we could turn this into like a 6-hour marathon if we really want to, but
should we?
Wow.
Should we just go another hour on the YouTubes, or should we go to I just want to keep talking.
Yeah.
I love having these conversations, man. These are my favorite ones.
Oh, I think we got to take it to the happy hour. The happy hour is so cool too. I don't know.
Yeah, okay.
The less amount of people, the more, if there's more signal with the questions asked, it's great. But I do think we should probably address these super chats before we go.
Oh, I didn't even see them.
And also, I'd love to give some background about me at some point. Yeah.
Oh, shit.
I'm sure some people are like, who the hell is this kid?
That's Rajat's fault, man.
You should probably do that now.
So we were just about to press the record button or a start button, and I was like, okay, Mason, we'll just kick things off here. I'll do the normal intro. You can introduce yourself. Rajat's like, no, we'll save that for later. We'll just get right into the topic here. We want to get things started. So sorry, Mason.
That's okay.
Now that
people are hooked. Now that people are hooked, they're actually listening to you.
Yeah.
People are asking if Mason has a YouTube channel. You don't, do you?
No, I don't. Yeah. I don't. You can find me on Twitter under my name, but so I've been a Bitcoiner for 5 years. Got in 2020. I was primed to be a Bitcoiner because my mom, when I was around 10 or 11 years old, sat me down, and she was a stockbroker at one point in her life, and she opened a Fidelity account and taught me about equities, taught me about stocks, taught me about dividends, share buybacks, share splits,
legend
earnings.
Cool.
Yeah. So that's kind of how I got introduced into finance in general. I traded my own account, did pretty well up through middle school and high school, just doing just buying Tesla, buying Apple, Facebook, like pretty simple digital monopolies. But I wouldn't have, I could have done better with Bitcoin, of course, but we all come to it in our own time. And during COVID, as I said, there was that cognitive dissonance where stocks all-time high, yet everything was shut down. And I started thinking more deeply about the money. I read Jeff Booth's book, Price of Tomorrow, which if you haven't read it, it's mandatory. It will change the way that you see the world. And I started listening to Saylor pretty intensely. At this point, this is when he was kind of having his awakening to Bitcoin at the same time. So it was a really interesting period. And if you haven't listened to old Saylor, it's much better because he's more exuberant. He's more he's thinking about Bitcoin obviously for the first time, and he's more passionate and excited about it now. After 5 years now, he's been asked the same question a million times. He's tired, and frankly, he's so far ahead of everyone that he's bored.
I think also he was sort of speaking to the individual back then in that way. Now his audience is sort of institutional capital in a way.
Yeah. So the message in some respect has to be watered down because of the audience that he's talking to. Yeah. So I think if you are an individual, go listen to some old Saylor. And so during the 2022, 2023 bear market, I started thinking about MicroStrategy at the time, now Strategy, thinking about the implications of what does it mean for a public company to hold a large amount of Bitcoin and use it as a unit of account, right? In the same way, an individual, we price the world in Bitcoin, we buy Bitcoin, we measure things through Bitcoin. What does it mean when a financial institution does that? And what does it mean when a public company in the public market, which has these pretty rigid structures, which are ETFs and different types of flows from institutions, what does it mean when Bitcoin enters that world? And so I started talking about it on Twitter and met Jeff Walton, who we mentioned at the beginning, and Raekwon and Ben Workman. And I joined a group called True North, MSTR, which really goes into what Strategy is doing, what Saylor is doing. And I look at it through a Bitcoin, like I would say like a rationalist Bitcoin maximalist perspective of, we're going through a transition here. This isn't a light switch yet. And what he's doing is actually really interesting. And it's beneficial in Bitcoin in terms of a lot of Bitcoiners around the world have an increased purchasing power because of this institutional money coming into Bitcoin. That strengthens the network, that allows Bitcoiners to go out there and build the world that they want to see. And so I was with this group, and I graduated college last spring, and I had a job offer from this company in Brazil called Melius, which was the first public company in Brazil to adopt a Bitcoin standard. So they converted their entire treasury into Bitcoin. And what we are is we're an app with 46 million users in Brazil, so a really large user base. Wow. That gives cash back on purchases. And, of course, you can see how that kind of integrates with Bitcoin. Melius actually means better, because at the time, our founders were sick of like credit card points and all of this nonsense. They want to give cash back. But now we've started giving Bitcoin back and are integrating Bitcoin financial services in the Brazilian market. And we are publicly traded, and something that I think the Bitcoin community is wrestling with right now is, what does it mean for a public corporation to have Bitcoin on their balance sheet? Are they a Bitcoin treasury company? And I think there's a difference between what Strategy and some others are doing by issuing debt to buy Bitcoin, and then a operating company who's profitable buying Bitcoin over time. And the differentiator there is, there's a Bitcoin treasury company, and then there's companies who have a Bitcoin treasury, right? Yeah. That's kind of the little switch, which I think is helpful. And I'm in the latter there. We run a profitable business that accumulates Bitcoin. And if you are an investor on a Bitcoin standard, you're trying to outperform Bitcoin. That's how I kind of view it, which is, we now live in a world where Bitcoin is, for many people, Bitcoin is savings. And if you are going to allocate to something else, if you're going to take risk, which is inherent in any investment, you want to beat Bitcoin. And that's what we are trying to do from our shareholder perspective, which is accumulate as much Bitcoin as possible, generate Bitcoin yield. And of course, I like to preface this with, we are not a replacement for Bitcoin. Bitcoin and self-custody, cold storage is paramount. And if you don't have that, that's what you should figure out. But if you are viewing the world through a Bitcoin lens, and I think this is kind of like an epistemic shift in investments in general, which is, you want to beat Bitcoin, that's your hurdle rate, then that's something that we offer. So yeah, that's what I do.
That's cool, man. That's really cool. So, I mean, there's 20 questions I have for that, but we're 2 minutes past our time here. The one thing I did want to ask you though, Mason, is like, what do you think? Like, when you think about the future here, do you plan on? We talked about a YouTube channel, but like, aside from the current role that you have there, what's like your next 5 or 10 years look like? Do you see yourself with this company? Do you see yourself kind of doing something with your own brand, or do they tie together there at all, or what's kind of like the next step for you?
Yeah, I mean, right now I'm really invested in Melius and what we're building. I'm really interested in the southern hemisphere of the world, because I think they've gotten frankly the shit end of the stick when it comes to fiat, right? And I think there's massive injustice there that needs to be righted. So if I can help with Bitcoin adoption there and progress it there, which I think the lands there are fertile for Bitcoin adoption, that's something I'm really interested in. But I'm mainly just interested in building the world that I want to see, which is a Bitcoin native world, in which is far more ethical and just than the system that we are in now. And I think, all of us living in the Northern Hemisphere, we've in some respects benefited from fiat, as much as it doesn't feel that way, as much as we get caught up in the day-to-day. But we have to realize there's billions of people out there who are in far worse, dire situations. And anything I can do to help those people or help the world is what I'm interested in.
That's the cool thing to me about Bitcoin, is like, it helps everybody. It's not something that's going to be helpful to Canada or the US or whoever adopts it first. Of course, they're going to have an advantage there, but just like individuals. No, frick, I wish we had more time here, but we do need to get going here, boys. Hey?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, that's, was there any more questions there? Shout out to Madame, I'm Adam, $295. Thank you. I'm guessing the name's Adam there. And Nav, another $5 here. I've been thinking of getting solar panels to get free electricity or go somewhere abroad where it's cheaper. Yeah, I think that's a key with mining, is you got to have some low electricity costs there. Okay. Well, fellas, big shout out to Mason for coming on today. Maybe he'll be our American/Brazilian correspondent in the future whenever we need a third here. This is actually the first episode. We've been doing this for damn near a year now, or 9 months or so. First one with 4 people. I think it went pretty smooth. We're pretty polite here in Canada, so we usually don't talk over each other. But big shout out to Mason for coming on. We'll have you back anytime that you're around, of course. And we're going to hop over to the Maple Bitcoin happy hour. So Rajat, do you have that one more time just before we kind of wrap up here, in case anybody wants to join us for, I guess, part 2 of this conversation? Mason said he's got to grab a beer here. So
yeah, give me a second.
Yeah, no problem.
There it is.
Yeah, honored to be on, guys. Yeah, thank you so much.
Of course. So
Great
awesome conversation.
That was awesome. Really fun.
Yeah, there's I mean, big shout out to True North too. I think those guys are doing a really good job in terms of kind of helping with the transition from the fiat world that we're in into the Bitcoin standard. There's a couple guys on True North that I watch pretty much every week, the True North guys. And I always notice that Mason, is it Nico, the other guy? Nithu or Soleil.
Yeah.
Soleil, yeah.
Soleil.
I've always found those two are kind of like, everybody's incredibly intelligent, but I always just found those two guys were kind of the hardcore Bitcoin maximalists, I guess, of that group, who were kind of living in the treasury world a little bit too. So again, big shout out to Mason. He doesn't have a YouTube channel, but he is on Twitter there. So you can just type in Mason Ford as he has it in his thing there. And yeah, we're heading over to the happy hour. So thanks again, Mason, very much. Oh, sorry, Rajat. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say, if you guys want to join the happy hour, it's a free trial. Mason said he'll be there. And if you want to, you can actually ask him questions during the trial, during the session.
Mason might rug you though. We'll see.
No, I'm coming.
He's coming.
Just kidding. Okay. Thanks everybody. Have yourselves a great Friday, a great weekend, and we'll be back here at the same time, same place next week. And thanks again, fellas. Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys.